Now the hard part. What did I get wrong in my video? Hello everyone, and welcome to Classy Well. So 1 year ago today, or 1 year ago several days ago, I posted this video about the history of Paradise Station. Fast forward to last spring, and this guy from this video told me that his brother was actually the project manager of the station. I sat down with him in May and interviewed him, and then I completely forgot to post this. So now, here is the behind the scenes of what happened to Paradise Station and why to this day you can't change from the Amtrak Keystone to the Strasburg Railroad at Lemon Place Junction. So I'm here with John Nahn, who was, you said you were the project manager for Paradise Station?
I was, yes.
Okay, so first of all, tell me about your involvement with Paradise Station.
The company I was with at the time was retained through a competitive process by the Red Rose Transit Authority to prepare plans for the design of the Paradise train station. The Red Rose's interest was primarily to connect a rail station to the Route 14 bus line that essentially ran east of Lancaster along the Route 30 corridor. What
sort of things did you do to make that happen?
We followed the Amtrak plans at the time. This was the late 90s. We followed the Amtrak plans at the time for a unmanned station stop. Design plans. We put it together. We presented it at the Paradise Township. We met with Amtrak. And, all the things that we needed to do to get this to become a reality.
Were you yourself in charge of the design at all, or were you more overseeing the people that were?
Well, I mean, I was the project manager in charge of the design. I mean, this is done by a team. I didn't, I might have personally designed some elements, but I had a team of engineers working for me to design the station to meet the Amtrak requirements to get it approved.
So tell me a bit about the station design.
It was a low-level platform. At the time, they were acceptable. Nowadays, we don't really do low-level platforms anymore. Everything's pretty much a high-level platform because of ADA. But this was prior, certainly this was after ADA, but prior to the government, the DOT's involvement in making sure that all platforms would be high-level. So we were still permitted at the time, and Amtrak was still building low-level platforms. So simply, Amtrak had to standard design plans for a low-level platform. We had to adapt that design to the site that was presented to us.
Now, if I understand correctly, the location for the station moved a couple of times.
The first location for the station was on Peckway Lane in Paradise Township. It was on the same side as the tracks. It was proposed at Strasburg, so it was in the south side of the tracks. It was at the underpass where Peckway Lane goes under the Amtrak line there. The Red Rose Transit had acquired an option on a parcel of property there that would have been enough room to create the station, create a bus turnaround, and a small number of parking spaces there, which is really all anybody was looking for at the time.
And then when did it move down to the interchange with the Strasburg?
There was some concern expressed by the residents there at Paradise Township at some of the meetings we went to, that they did not want the station there for some reason. I don't know, again, there's folks that don't want lots of things for lots of reasons. Maybe it was a NIMBY concern. I have no idea. But there certainly wasn't a lot of public support, or at least as much as we had hoped for the station at that location. While the Strasburg had indicated that they would be interested in serving the station, for them to get to the station would have required permission from Amtrak to run on the line, which can be gotten. I mean, certainly Strasburg has run on Amtrak's line before there, but to do that, they'd have to do it every time they wanted to serve the station. So it would not have been convenient. They would have had to call the dispatchers and get access to the line to get onto there to serve, to serve the station and then go back to the Strasburg. So with the lack of public support, and because there was a somewhat lack of public support, I guess you could say the elected officials in Paradise Township were not 100% enthralled with it then. They have a responsibility to serve their voters. So Strasburg offered to make property that they owned available for consideration for placement of the station where their line meets the Amtrak line at Lemon Place Junction.
And how far did that plan get before the FRA kind of stepped in?
Well, I mean, the first plan, we had a full set of design plans, and we had submitted them to Paradise Township, and we're going through their land development process with those plans. I mean, they were fairly well advanced. About the only thing we needed to do was create some construction specifications, and we could have built the station. But everything we moved to the new location, and I will again say that those plans got very far into final design before we kind of pulled the plug on the entire project, I guess. And it wasn't us per se; it was the Red Rose Transit Authority that at the time decided that this wasn't going to be worth the time and effort to do this, and they decided to essentially abandon the project.
So if I understand correctly, there was the original Peckway Lane design,
Yes.
and they moved it because of the Strasburg to the Strasburg interchange, and then
Yes.
the FRA took issue with that, and then they were investigating doing another station kind of in between those two locations, and then that's kind of where the trail went cold. I couldn't really figure out why
There was never any serious design or analysis for anything between the two stations. I know there was discussions because some folks didn't want to give up on the project, but there was never, the only plans that were ever advanced were the plans for the two stations. Again, it was originally intended to be a tie-in to the bus, kind of an intermodal type of thing. And honestly, the community out there, the older Amish community, they would prefer to ride the train. That's what they ride when they go long distance. And for them to ride the train now, they have to travel into Lancaster City to get on Amtrak or So they thought that it was very convenient for them to have a station where they connect Amtrak in their own neighborhood rather than having to travel distances to get there. Of course, there was the tie-in with Strasburg too. I mean, Strasburg is one of the most, if not the most popular tourist railroads in the country, certainly a beacon for tourist railroads everywhere. It's the railroad that they all want to become. To be able to tie them directly to the Amtrak national system would have been, I think, an ideal attraction, an ideal tourist boost. Certainly in line with the way we think about transit nowadays, having that intermodal connection, not only providing the bus connection, the connection for the older Amish community, but the connection to the Strasburg Railroad. I mean, it just made perfect sense.
So what would you say was the death blow to the project?
There was a couple problems. I mean, anytime you're designing a rail station, one of the issues is always access between the platforms, and specifically pedestrian access between the platforms. You accept that somebody's going to take the train, they're going to be leaving from one side of the tracks, and then when they come home and or vice versa, they're going to be on the other side of the tracks. So there's always needs to be a way to get from one platform to the other, from one side of the tracks to the other. It's preferred that you not cross at grade. In fact, we don't cross pedestrians at grade. Trains on that corridor move way too quick. Sure, you can say there's only there's like 8 or 12 trains a day. They're great. There's lots of times where this train's not there, but still, it's not worth the risk. Trains can't stop when they see you. They don't see you in enough time. It's just not feasible to have people cross at grade. And this was a tough thing for a lot of people to accept. Even the project sponsor, Red Rose Transit, didn't quite fully grasp that, look, we can't cross pedestrians at grade no matter what kind of warnings and devices we put in. So the Peckway Lane station, the first location, had the advantage of being adjacent to a highway, an overpass. So there was a way in which we could ramp pedestrians down to the roadway. We could have put up some barriers and still provided enough width underneath the roadway to have pedestrians walk underneath the tracks there to get from platform to platform. When we got to the second site at the Strasburg site behind the old Denlinger lumber facility, and it's not even there anymore, but at the time it was Denlinger lumber, and then I think it moved to stock lumber. And back there was a little bit more difficult problem in getting pedestrians from one side of the platforms to the other. Ideally, right about the same time we were doing this, PennDOT rebuilt the Route 30 bridge over the Amtrak railroad idea. You know, it would have been great if at the time we could have combined the station design into the bridge design and used the bridge, put in some stairways and got people across that way. That wasn't happening. PennDOT wouldn't delay the project for us. So they're immediately east of the Strasburg location. There was a creek underpass, a creek ran underneath the railroad. And beside there was what they used to call a cow pass. It's a widened section of the underpass, if you will. It was about 6-8 feet wide. And originally I was told it was for farmers to use for their cows to cross the tracks from one pasture to another. And we thought there was a way to adapt that into a pedestrian walkway so that I could get pedestrians from one platform to the other. We came up with extensive ramping ideas because we had to, at this point, meet ADA criteria, at least in the sense we can still have a low-level platform or a partial low-level platform, but we had to be able to get pedestrians from one side to the other and meet ADA standards. So we had lots of ramping to go on there, and that was fine. We could put all that ramping in, and we could get down to this and back up to the other side. There was a concern, though, that when it flooded, we could be endangering pedestrians, in the event of a flood. And we came up with a system where they, much like a sump pump float, a warning system where when the water got high enough, it would alert warnings, lock gates, things like that. And I'll say that met with marginal acceptance. I'm not sure everybody got a real warm, fuzzy feeling about that, but that was one way. And I think we could have overcome that issue. The secondary issue was that the Strasburg location is on a slight curve in the railroad. It's just the way it is. That's where the Amtrak line curves through that area. And we had to at least provide a what's called a mini high level platform. There had to be level boarding access for handicapped individuals to get onto the train. We weren't going to do a full high level, but we had to do at least a mini high level where it's a smaller concrete platform and a ramping system that, when you position the train the appropriate way, pedestrians or not pedestrians, but handicapped folks can roll in with their wheelchair. The problem with that is we could not get it close enough to the railroad on the curve and still meet the freight rail clearances. Now, we could certainly meet the passenger rail clearances, but we couldn't meet the freight rail clearances. And this is where the Federal Railroad Administration got involved. Part of that line is still reserved for freight traffic. Now, I don't know the last time a freight train dropped that line. At the time, there was possibly more freight trains than there are now. At the time, I guess high industry still maintained a concrete and steel production plant in Eastern Lancaster. And this was the rail access to that, if they needed to bring something out on rail. I don't know if that plant's even still open anymore. But there was a concern that the high level platform would, interfere with the passage of those trains. Nowadays, we were designing this now, we would have to design in there a bypass track for the freight trains. In other words, if freight was still a part of using this line, we would have to move the Amtrak lines over and put a third track in between them, probably roughly about a mile track, so that freight trains could bypass the station but still allow Amtrak trains to serve it. I mean, geometrically, we certainly could have made this work, but we couldn't make it work and still accommodate the clearances necessary for the freight trains. And for that reason, FRA would not give approval for the station. That was the big holdup there. Amtrak pretty much stated that they didn't care because all of their low-level platforms are equipped with mechanical lifts. If there is in fact a wheelchair-bound person, the conductor gets out, puts the mechanical lift there and picks them up, puts them in the train. That is, at the time, that was an acceptable solution, but unfortunately it wasn't acceptable to the FRA. It was acceptable to FDA, Red Rose Transit, Strasburg, but FRA would not live with that solution. And honestly, it got very expensive. If you've ever designed rail stations, we were having meetings on a fairly regular basis with FRA and FTA and Amtrak, and there was 24 people in the meeting rooms. There really just me, one person from Strasburg, one or two people from Red Rose, and everybody else from the federal government. When you design a station for Amtrak, they charge you for their time to review it. So every time there was a meeting, Red Rose Transit was getting billed for the 10 or 12 people from Amtrak that were in the meeting. Their fees for meetings were more than our design fees for the station. And I think Red Rose started to, wince at the fees going, we just can't keep going down this road. They wanted to really serve the Amish community, but it didn't look like anyone else really wanted to cooperate with that thought process.
So basically, you're saying the project was killed because of two design elements that weren't really workable, and the second of which the FRA stepped in and got involved. And it sounds like since then, they never really considered a serious proposal, or they never really moved it forward. Now, I don't know if you were still involved at this point, but I heard something about the old Lancaster, Oxford, and Southern station that Lynn Moninger was thinking of rebuilding in Paradise and potentially using as an interchange station. Were you involved with that at all?
No, I was not. He had talked about that, but again, these projects require sponsors. Amtrak was not the sponsor for this project. Red Rose Transit Authority was the sponsor. I don't know if they'd be interested in doing this again. If Strasburg wanted to take up the mantra, they could. If Lancaster County Planning Commission, I mean, there'd have to be a project sponsor to get this moving again.
And do you think that there could be a Paradise station in the future, or is it kind of a wet elephant at this point?
Well, if you wanted to put more, I mean, understand the original budget for the station at Peckway Lane was about $2 million. It was a fairly small project. Well, by the time we moved to Paradise, it got up to $10 million, became a much larger project. I think it would take at least twice that much money now to do it now. Number one, if we're going to do it, it has to be high level platforms. Okay, there's no doubt about that. Number two, if there's still freight service there, we're going to have to take and do some track work to rearrange the track. Okay, we're going to have to provide some type of freight bypass there, a third track in between the Amtrak tracks to provide for that movement of freight. If there's no freight needed to run on the line, if they've abandoned that idea, then there might be a possibility to make this work with high-level platforms on the current line. I mean, there are some things that we could do there. Aside from that, Strasburg had the time, their goal was to, because they own a fair amount of property there and we weren't using it at all for the station. One of the things we had designed there also was a new turntable for the Strasburg. We had designed a turntable pit. We had to, and Strasburg actually owns two turntables right now that sit behind that row of stores that's just, I'll call it west of the Pennsylvania Railroad Museum. Their line extends across Route 741 there, and there's some stub end tracks there where they keep equipment. And if you go back there, you can see there's two turntable bridges sitting there on trucks. One was going to be placed at Strasburg, and one was going to be placed at Paradise so that they could actually, turn the locomotive so that it faces the right direction on every run, which I thought that was a great idea too. So that certainly is something that could be done too. I mean, it has the potential to be an entire, destination, if you will, a mecca for rail. And I got to think it would certainly increase Amtrak ridership. I mean, if you're going to Philadelphia or Harrisburg for the day or Lancaster for the day, you get on the train, you ride an hour, you can be riding on the road to Paradise and see trains on turntables and steam locomotives, and you can still go back to Philly at night. I mean, it would be, I think, a real boon to that whole entire area. With the new funding, the new transportation bill, there's money out there. I mean, with the proper sponsor that wanted to do this, I think it could become a reality. It seems, we certainly could dust off the old plans. I think we can make the geometry work for the stations. Maybe we got to do a little bit of track work to soften the curve a little bit, but I think the geometry could be made to work for the stations. And I think that if we couldn't go underneath the railroad, there might be a way. I mean, I'll be honest with you, nowadays, we probably have to put elevators in too, because we have to provide for that pedestrian access, but there could be a way to maybe use the Route 30 bridge as a platform to attach some elevator shafts to and get some elevators across the tracks there, so people could, take an elevator up, use the sidewalk that's on the Route 30 bridge and take an elevator back down. Or maybe we move the tracks and consider a center platform design, much like the brand new Paoli station, and a single set of elevators. I think there's ways to do this with enough funding and a project sponsor that wants to see this happen. And again, it's not a shot about Red Rose. I think that this far exceeded anything they ever had intended to do. And it just at some point wasn't in their budget anymore, wasn't in their thinking anymore. So, but with a different sponsor, maybe this could become a reality.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely do you think that it is that there will eventually be a Paradise Station, and how hopeful are you that there will eventually be a Paradise Station?
I'm probably more hopeful than it is likely, I'll say. Certainly, I have a passion. This is something that I started and spent a lot of time, money, and effort in doing. Love to see it happen again. Likelihood, and again, I keep coming back to that's going to depend on the project sponsor. Is there somebody out there that wants to see this happen? It's not going to be Amtrak. It's not going to be FRA. It's not going to be FTA. And I don't think Strasburg is a big enough organization for it to be them. But they're just, this is a big project. So it has to be a government agency or somebody like that. Again, I keep going back, maybe Lancaster County Planning Commission or somebody there that wants to actually see this project happen. That's the only way it becomes a reality. I don't know that you can put a number on it. I wouldn't even know how to put a number on it. It would all depend on the sponsor. If you've got a really good sponsor, I think the likelihood is pretty high because I think the money's out there right now, and there's a desire to spend this money, and there's a love of Amtrak right now. That Amtrak's going to be desires to put stations everywhere right now. That's the directive from the federal government. That's the directive from the president to build Amtrak stations everywhere. I think a Paradise Station with the proper ADA criteria fills the bill, meets all the government's goals of what they want to have right now.
Now the hard part. What did I get wrong in my video?
Again, I think you've heard what I said. I think you got it most right. I mean, some of the things you said, the third station never really made it to a design or planning stage that I'm aware of. The fact that it moved was, yes, maybe because of resident complaints, but there was also some interest, I think, on the part of Strasburg to get it closer to their railroad. Where the Strasburg location was, they wouldn't need Amtrak permission to get onto the line because the platform was designed to take people right. It was kind of like a joint platform that would take people right to their platform. We had a low-level platform for Strasburg because they don't have to meet ADA criteria, and the mini high-level platform for the Amtrak trains. The pedestrian issue is not to be underscored either. I mean, that was an issue, getting people from one side of the platform to the other. So
I based this off of just descriptions that were in the newspaper and then told a digital artist what to draw, and he drew it. So how close do you think this is to what it would have actually looked like?
At one time, there was a station shelter. At one time, there wasn't a shelter. There was also a platform for Strasburg, which I don't know if I can see there or not, that we a low-level platform for boarding the Strasburg train that would have been on your side there of the Strasburg train, not the other side. Now, Strasburg may have at some point decided that they were going to put in some type of station building. I was not privy to that. It looks like you're showing a roof line of what might be a cover for a Strasburg platform that was never part of our plan, I'll say. But that's pretty close, though. You pretty much have a good rendering there. You know a lot about the project.
Yeah, I searched Paradise Station as keywords on the LNP archives, and that's pretty much how I got the story.
Oh, cool.
Was there any talk about timing the Strasburg trains to meet the Amtrak trains or vice versa?
Oh, absolutely. We talked about that a lot, and that would have been up to Strasburg to do that. I mean, Amtrak obviously wasn't going to adjust their schedule, but Strasburg was very much behind, yes, whatever we need to do, we'll schedule our trains so that they arrive when the Amtrak train arrives, and we'll take people back on our line. So yeah, that was always part of the plan, was to schedule the Strasburg trains with some, not all, I don't think all, but with some of the Amtrak trains.
And it sounded to me, at least from some versions of the plan in the newspaper, that there was also going to be like an RRTA sub-network towards Strasburg tourism destinations like Sight and Sound Theater and stuff. Was that ever advanced?
RRTA was considering, they were considering service upgrades, service changes to work this station in better to their service. At the time, the Route 14 ended, there was a loop in Kinzers. Essentially, it was a dirt loop that the bus would get to the end of the run, turn around, and go back the other way. The intention was to truncate the service at the Paradise Station, to stop running the Kinzers and just simply run to the Paradise Station where you can't see it, but on the between Route 30 and the station, the tracks, I guess east of what at the time was the lumber yard, there was a piece of property that Paradise Township owned that that Red Rose Transit Authority had an option on. It might be where the Paradise Township Municipal Building is now, because that wasn't there when we did the original project. And that was designed as a parking lot. We had, I don't know, I want to say 20 cars in the parking lot, a bus turnaround, some hitching posts for some buggies and things like that. Again, try to give that intermodal type of system. The buses would have pulled in there, dwelled, for the trains or schedule adjustments, and then gone back the other direction. Yeah, they did talk about some other service changes to try to better serve that corridor, but I don't think they made much headway on them because the station didn't come to fruition.
Besides Paradise Station, what are some other stations that you and your company have been involved with?
Well, the company I work for now, we do what's called project management oversight work for Federal Transit Administration projects. Right now, I'm on an oversight team that's reviewing ADA issues, ADA upgrades to 8 stations in New York City for New York City Transit for MTA. These are elevators and station rebuilds and things like that. A fairly large project. I'm also working right now on the oversight team for the Bayonne Bridge on New Jersey Transit's Raritan line. They're replacing not the Bayonne Bridge, the Raritan Bridge, the bridge over the Raritan River. A very large $600 million project to replace that bridge. Company works on transit projects all over the country.
Well, cool. And since you're working with ADA accessibility, what do you personally think are some of the key elements of universal design when it comes to transit stations?
Well, fundamentally, FTA's guidance and the FRA's guidance is level boarding, without a doubt. I mean, that's the way to sum it up in 2 words: level boarding. You need to have a level walkway from the train to the platform, all the way over to the next platform, down to the parking lot, down to the bus, whatever. It must be level boarding. So, you're talking ramps, and in this case, you'd be talking elevators to get across the track, and you'd be talking high level platforms and things like that. Nothing there that can't be done. It's just, a matter of appropriating the paycheck to do that, and in the past, the money's ever been there. And I think we are at a unique time right now, this moment, that, the money is there if they want to go get this, or if somebody wants to be the champion and go get this.
Excellent. Well, hope someone does.
Me too.
Well, thank you for joining me on
Sure.
my channel and for filling me in on this fascinating chapter of Lancaster County transportation history.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
So, could we actually see a Paradise Station someday after all? Who knows? It's all up to the people in charge of those sorts of things. But if you want it to happen, comment below and be sure to like and subscribe. Take care until the next one.